Hi, my name is Lindsay Hartilius, and I'm going to present on dysphasia. Language for most children begins at birth. A child must be able to see, to hear, to understand, and to remember in order to develop language. Children must also have the physical capabilities to form speech. The first 3 years of a child's life are the most important period for acquiring speech. The prevalence of speech disorders in America in young children accounts for 8 to 9%. By the time a child hits the first grade, roughly 5% of all children have noticeable speech disorders. The majority of these disorders have no known cause, which leads me to my topic, dysphasia. Phonetically, dys means bad and phage means speech, from the Greek root word. Dysphasia is also commonly known as aphasia, meaning no speech. The basic definition is a language disorder marked by deficiency in generation of speech and comprehension, ranging from no speech at all to difficulty naming certain objects. It's both considered a learning disability and a communicative disorder, and it's not to be confused with dysphagia, which is a swallowing condition and a separate speech disorder. More characteristics. Dysphagia typically occurs in adults as a result of a stroke, a brain tumor, Alzheimer's, dementia, or other brain injury. Statistics show that 35 to 40% of all adults that encounter a stroke will have aphasia as a result. Dysphasia in children, called developmental dysphasia, is thought to be either genetic or caused by a lesion in the brain which develops during pregnancy. There are two main types of dysphasia: receptive or fluent, and expressive or non-fluent. The receptive person will have a hard time comprehending speech. They can hear your voice, they can read print, but they do not understand the meaning of the message. They may take language literally, and their own speech will be disturbed because of this. Whereas the expressive may have a difficult time putting words together to make meaning. So they know what they want to say, they just can't get the words out to communicate the message. One specific type of expressive is called Broca's aphasia, which results from a brain injury to the left frontal area of the brain, or the Broca area. These expressives will have difficulty completing sentences and may emit words such as is and the. Where does speech come from? Speech comes from your brain. Whether you're right-handed or left-handed, most people, the majority, have the speech is derived from the left side of the brain. Why is that important? Well, that's important because if you have any traumatic event or any kind of injury, tumor, issue with the left side of your brain, most likely your speech will be affected. And researchers across the board do agree that dysphasia is neurologically based because of this. Symptoms. Okay, so as educators, what does a dysphasic child look like? How do they act in class? What are some symptoms? The difficulties they have. They have a hard time understanding what people say. They have a hard time following directions, organizing their thoughts, finding the right words when they're speaking, telling stories. In class, they may not be able to put sentences together. They may use the same phrase, the same words, filler words, like, using the tenses incorrectly. They may use the past tense and the present tense out of order. They may leave words out when speaking. And because of this, they may have a lower level of vocabulary knowledge than some of their peers, some of their academic peers. Emotional state of these students. Well, these students do not have an impaired intellectual capabilities. So they have an inability to merely communicate. So this will make them frustrated, easily frustrated. They may lash out in class, disappointed, depressed. They may feel alone, lonely, angry. They carry with them a higher level of stress because of their lack of communication skills. As they get older, their stressors are going to appear in a different manner. As they get older, they're going to deal with more pressure at school, middle school, high school students, maybe bullying situations. The fact that they stand out because of a lack of speech, it's going to be a challenging road for them to overcome in their academic years. Diagnosis considerations. Dysphasia is not always quickly diagnosed because there may be other disorders or other learning disabilities also involved. Some things that cause kind of the slowdown of the diagnosis. Student may be bilingual. They may be speaking multiple languages at home. They may have hearing loss. They may have another speech disorder. They may have stuttering, oral dysprasia, the swallowing condition, ADHD. They may have epileptic episodes. Typically, I mentioned before earlier that any young child that has any kind of brain injury or stroke, they would possibly be diagnosed as with dysphasia. But in addition to that, typically students that have Down syndrome, Klinefelter syndrome, Fragile X, and autism are diagnosed with dysphasia. Academic considerations. What does it look like in the classroom? These students are going to have difficult time talking, communicating the message at school, understanding what the teacher is saying, what their peers are saying around them, listening, and writing. It's going to come out in all subjects, both language arts and math, across the board, social studies, science. It's not, their lack of communication is going to be something that they're going to have to work through in their academic, life. Identifying signs for teachers. What does this student look like? What do these types of dysphasic students look like? They may have a tough time paying attention in class. They may have really challenge with reading comprehension exercises. There may be assumed behavioral problems or attention problems, which are assumed, but really they may be due to dysphasia. So you have to be very clear there. What I've attached in this slide is a YouTube video to introduce you to Sarah Scott. She's a 16-year-old that's had a stroke, and as a result of the stroke, she has expressive aphasia. To give you an idea what a student with aphasia looks like and sounds like, and the characteristics are. How can you help these students? Okay, well, depending on their level of language, one-on-one or group speech therapy might be built into their IEP, and possibly special ed support, one-on-one para. It really depends on where they are. In an inclusive classroom environment, as a teacher, speak slowly. Use as many non-verbal gestures as you can. Incorporate visual media when necessary. Use topics that the children might be interested in. The key thing is to adapt your way of speaking to the child's level of language, and encourage the family and the child to speak one language for any of the bilingual situations that you may encounter. Teachers should really try to keep their language simple but adult. You should try to avoid speaking for the aphasic student and encourage other modes of expression. Allow the student to write journal entries, drawing, writing, give them multiple ways to complete an assignment. Allow yes and no responses in the classroom. Try to encourage these students to be independent and try to avoid being overbearing so that they really feel that they stand out in class. And then the next step, where do we go from here? So as your students at the, finish high school, when one graduates from high school, their special education services end, which means their IEP team will no longer be available. So it's important that you, as a parent, will work with your aphasic child to develop a transition plan for the future after school. So what are some ideas for that plan? Well, number one, make sure that the child is an advocate for themselves. They can explain their learning disability to the secondary school that they might be looking at, the university, the vocational school, whatever they're looking for after high school. Make sure that if there's local community support groups, that they can get together and gather with their peers that kind of experiencing the same thing that they are. It's important to build a working resume. And for a young adult, it's completely acceptable to give a personal statement. And this is what I've gone through. This is my learning disability, that these are all the challenges that I encountered, and this is how I overcame those challenges. And this is what I have to offer you. This is my after school work experience, maybe volunteer experience that I've done. I have a learning disability, but these are all the things I've accomplished, and this is, what I can offer you to an employer, an after-school employer. And then as a parent of a child that's aphasic, it's important to visit those schools. If your child's planning on going to university, VOTEC school, go to the school. Visit with their disabilities department and see if there's services that are offered there for children with the same learning disability. Just make sure that you're keeping the lines of communication open with the secondary school that they're going to attend after their high school, elementary school years are over. And thank you for listening. And that's my learning disability presentation.